Good evening and welcome to the show On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. Now, the Parliamentary Budget Committee is currently scrutinizing the National Budget Framework paper for the financial year 2024-2025. On Wednesday, the MPs interfaced with officials from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. And so tonight, our focus is the Budget Framework paper 2024-2025. And members of Parliament are on the show tonight, both of them. And let me introduce my guests this evening. I have the Katikamu South Member of Parliament, the Honorable Hassan Kirumira. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable Hassan. Good evening and a warm welcome to you.
Good evening.
I have from Bugwe, Samia Bugwe Central, the Honorable Dennis Nyangweso. Thank you so much for joining us, Dennis. Good evening, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
We'll be talking about the budget proposal framework paper, but I think it is important because the biggest issue that happened this afternoon was the release of the PLO results. I know you have children in your constituencies, and so you do. It is important that we look into that issue before we delve into matters of budget. What have been your highlights, Hassan, in the PLO results that were released this afternoon? What stands out for you? What concerns you? What excites or even what really scares you?
Good evening, our viewers, once again. Of course, I need to first of all congratulate Ugandans, our children that sat for PLE exams, and the good results that they obtained. Actually, my daughter was also a candidate, and I want to congratulate her specifically for the good results she delivered.
Congratulations, Hassan.
She got 8. Mariam, we are very proud of you, and all children of Uganda. But of course, if you look at the general performance and critique it, you will establish that there's some decrease in the quality of results that we obtained this year around. If you look at the number of distinctions and how the boy child performed, then you're going to have to wonder. I think there is a lot of goodwill when it comes to the girl child, and I think it is high time we start creating a balance between the boy child and the girl child in terms of education. But at the end of the day, education gives you the edge, it empowers you, and I want to congratulate them. And now they start a whole new field of higher education, high school education, and all the best. Congratulations to the parents as well, the children, and the schools that managed to deliver the results.
Thank you, Hassan. And Honorable Dennis Nyangweso, your own take from Samia Bugwe Central.
Yeah.
There are many schools there, and I'm sure you've also been getting the news. What's your appreciation of the results that were released today by UNEP?
Thank you, Kamara. I want to congratulate UNEP for the work well done. And I congratulate the parents together with the children who have excelled. One thing that came out prominently out of the release of the results, one is the number of students who register for PLOE and they don't sit. 12,000. This should be a concern, because the period from which the children are registered to sit the PLOE is very short, and in that short time we lost 12,000 children who registered for PLOE and didn't sit. But more pronouncingly is the number of children who are ungraded. 80,000. These are SAT exams. And because of one reason or another, we are listening to the explanations for the ungraded children are those ones who have either X or they have totally not been able to produce anything tangible. And this is a concern. Where are these children going? So as leaders, we must now start looking at how are we going to look at these children.
You know, because Honorable Dennis, these are children who have spent 10 or 7 years in school, and 80,000 of them, 80,000 is a big number. 80,000 families today have children who probably have nowhere to go.
Yeah, they're in a state of hopelessness, and they're young people who must contribute to the growth of their country tomorrow, and also be able to be self-sustaining at personal and family level. So this is a concern for all of us. But back home, I want to congratulate the children who passed very well in my district. I've been supporting them. We celebrate together the results. And I was in the constituency last week when UNEP announced, and I promised those who pass, I would have done it for everyone, because to pass you don't need the first grade only, but because of resources and for those ones who have done well and gotten a first grade, we shall be celebrating very soon. in the district together to promote them, and we give them some bit of startup to start their second.
What is still intriguing my mind, Hassan, is that the 80,000 children who the government has said you are ungraded, it can traumatize them. It can actually be, you know, a scar on their conscience as they move on, because the government has said you are actually, there's nowhere for you to go.
Of course, it goes back to government policy, especially when it comes to education, and what is the major objective at that particular level of primary 7. If you look at other countries, they prolong the period at which they test learners nationally. For example, in South Africa, you go up to matric, that is grade 12, without sitting for national exams. So I think it's high time we start to review our curriculum on the basis of what we want as a country, determine what time are we supposed to grade these learners, because sometimes it motivates and sometimes it demotivates. So it's about striking a balance between what we want as a country. Assessment, for, of course, the bigger picture is assessment.
And there is another big issue you legislators you need to pay attention to, because when you look at the numbers of enrollment and those who eventually sit for PLE, almost half, in some cases more than half of the children who go to P1 as they enroll, more than half of the number, they drop out. They don't sit for PLE. So we are asking, where are the Ugandan children? If they start 700,000, probably they started when they are 1.3 or 1.4. Where is the other half, Hassan?
There's so many contributing factors towards that. Of course, you cannot rule out the financial abilities of different parents to sustain and pay fees for their children. Of course, the government came up with the idea of free education. But again, you need to question that in the real sense of free education. Is it really free? And then, of course, accessibility to schools. Then we have early marriages. So many factors that contribute to dropout. That's why I've make mention of the fact that we need to review our curriculum in terms of benefits to our children, especially at that stage of, because primary education is part of early childhood development. You cannot rule that out.
Honorable Dennis, so, when you have almost 700 or 800 children who enrolled for primary 1 and they don't sit for PLE, as a legislator, that should concern you?
Yeah, very much. One, but we have also been concerned with the numbers, and at one time we asked the Auditor General to audit these numbers. One, we are aware that the support, the UPE grant to schools is dependent on the number of children schools enrolled, and there has been suspicion that possibly there has been an inflation of these numbers to attract bigger grants to the schools. Otherwise, almost 55% of the children do PLE, meaning 45% of the children who enrolled at P1 don't complete primary. And this should concern all of us. One, there is free education. Given today's statistics, out of the 700,000 children, 540 were UPE children. And therefore, that is one of the success stories of UPE. But however, the 45% who drop out along the way because of, one, the Honorable Chirumira has talked about the cultural practices, these early marriages. In fact,
the real word should be child marriage, because you can marry at 20, but it's early and it's not child marriage. Child marriage. You can marry at 25, it's still early, but it's okay.
Socio-economic issues.
Yes, poverty, much as we have been talking about free education, but it's not totally free. And there are some basics which parents have failed to attain. Also access to schools. Some of these, the government policies that at least every parish should have a primary school. We have so many parishes without primary schools. So,
Honorable, still on this issue of education, before we leave it, because it's important, the Minister of Education raised the concern that the boy child, you have also talked about it, the boy child seems now to be, you know, they are not completing at the same level, at the same rate with the girl child. Of course, there's been a lot of effort put on the girl child, a lot of activism, which is good because the girl has been fighting, you know, the patriarchal nature of the Ugandan, the African society. But now we have reached a level where maybe the boy child also needs another kind of affirmative action. What could be the problem now?
You see, our biggest issue, especially in policy implementation and formulation, sometimes you get too excited, and that is problematic because the more you start emphasizing the girl child as if the boy child has been previously advantaged, then you are losing the whole plot. I think at that level we need to strike a balance between the boy child and the girl child, and of course find ways of bringing them at the same level, because at the end of the day, believe me, if the boy child is not well catered for, it's going to be a problem to the girl child at some time T. So government policy formulation and implementation need to be very intentional and deliberate in terms of making sure that we strike a balance between the girl child and the boy child. Because if you look at performance this time around, you'll see that the girls are now progressing better. Even parents at home, you'll find out that parents are favoring the girl child ahead of the boy child. They're all going to the same school, same classes, and you find there's some mismatch that we need to address as a country, and that is through policy formulation and implementation.
What is your take on the boy child and how the results are reflecting the boy child in 2023's PLA results?
Yeah, it concerns all of us, but one, you should know that statistically, the female gender is 51% of the population. That has been there. But when you look at the enrollment at primary level with the introduction of UPE, you know, previously parents used to give preference to the girls because of the, to the boys because of the availability of resources and opportunity cost made. But now that the girls can still go to school without a serious financial burden to the parents, and they are majority. So that's why, first of all, you see that majority, actually, if the boys were more than the girls at primary enrollment, one would be concerned. Because statistically, the female gender is supposed to be.
Yeah, though when you reach, like you said, when you reach senior 4 and maybe at A6, now there there's a mismatch. Mm-hmm. Probably. So, you know, what is likely to increase on the quality of education? There's the grilling of kids so that they can pass PLOE, they can pass O level. But at the end of the day, you have somebody who has passed an exam but really is not cannot articulate themselves. They don't have the simple skills, analytical skills, you know, skills that can help them in society. But when you look at their report and look at their CV, they're incredibly beautiful to a person who is perhaps even unemployable when moving up.
I've been fortunate that I did my PhD on assessment, and there's two important concepts that we need to deal with. One is assessment for learning and assessment for results. I think in Uganda our biggest focus is assessment for results, and then we forget the bigger picture, which is assessment for learning. And that's why you find schools skewed towards how do we get results from this particular learner, and then it becomes more like rote learning, making sure some of them even go to an extra mile of they call kasasi, getting kasasi, practice. Yeah, getting cheating, of course. And that's where we get it wrong. So assessment should be for learning. We need to make sure that our learners learn wholesomely and get proper ideas, and that's why this new curriculum that they are trying to implement in high school is more outcome based, to the extent that it helps learners to create their own knowledge, eventually to help them to widen their cognitive thinking and ability to do things.
So we need to. There's going to be something called a continuous assessment, which, as opposed to wait for an exam after 4 years or an exam after 7
now,
years.
that is an element of assessment for learning.
The assessment for learning. But that continuous assessment in a commercialized education sector, how are we going to be sure that it's actually going to reflect the actual learning capacity of a child as opposed to the interest, commercial interest of a school owner?
You see, continuous assessment, it starts from the beginning of the academic period.
Yes.
And of course they do assignments, projects, and those projects contribute to the final mark.
Yes.
And there is always a correlation between what you got at the beginning and the final mark that you obtain. So now it helps to build learners' results over time, and it takes away the pressure from the learners.
Are you suggesting that the school will have that sense of integrity to actually show us the percentage of the continuous learning is not compromised to reflect a beautiful picture when it is not the exact?
Of course, in other advanced countries, if a learner gets 10% in the final exams and had 90% in continuous assessment, that doesn't count. So there's so many ways of establishing. There should be a correlation. You should be able to see progression over time.
Honorable Nyangwe, so back in the day, in the 70s, in the 80s, or even I should say the golden era of Uganda, perhaps in the 60s, before we happened to be around, that a child would aspire to sit the same exam and compete, whether you are in Manjas or you are in Samia Bugwe, or for my case you are in Kenjojo or you are in Kabale. You wouldn't get scared because you're competing with somebody in Buganda Road or Nakasero. You are more or less at the same level. But now it appears some areas, I've been looking at the performance of some districts, Madiokolo, Namisindwa, which is closer to you, and which other districts. So the performance is bad. But also in rural Uganda, the performance is not good. So, and yet when you 30 years ago, it didn't matter where you have sat your PLE from, you'd aspire and compete favorably with somebody around Buganda Road. How can we bring that equalizer?
What inspired that kind of learning and consistency was the selection process, the merit selection process at that time. Because you do your exams and apply without jostling and trying to influence the processes of getting admission. You would get mentors. Somebody who has performed so well and has gone to Nyakasura from Tororo would inspire one, and therefore they would just the merit system of selection. But nowadays it's unfortunate, and it was made worse by there was a time UNEB almost stopped giving grading the best schools. You remember that time when I remember in the early 90s, the best schools per district, and they were based on just the first grades alone, and one would be having very many first grades, but when you look at the percentage, almost 13% of the children are passing first grade, but because they are 50, because of there were 500 children, they are taken to have performed so well. Yet you have someone who has 12 children are passing first grade, but he had 22 in the school, and is almost 60% of the children are passing first grade, but they were not graded at that. They were not given that ranking, as because the ranking was based on first grade, and that has been the biggest challenge. But back to the question which you asked, how do we manage, how do we do the merit system in this competitive environment with the competence-based learning? One, like Honorable Chirumira has said, this continuous assessment, one, it promotes teamwork, it promotes leadership, and these are skills which are developing at very early stage. I've been in a field of recruitment, and we look at some of these skills as very key: leadership skills, teamwork skills, which had no room to develop. But with this competence-based learning, children are given assignments, they are given leadership roles, and they start developing these competencies.
Okay.
I've been in some of these schools when these students are presenting their projects, and you see leadership, and you see coordination, teamwork. When students realize that we can all succeed.
But do we have the necessary investment in our schools to really be able to take on the new curriculum of projects of competence based, and because practical issues, because you needed some investment, especially in schools that are privately owned? What happened?
You see, that's a whole debate between rurality and urban education, and what kind of facilities are available in rural schools to enable learners to be educated. Of course, this implementation of curriculum is beautiful, but the ugly part of it is that schools are not well equipped in terms of resources, especially rural schools. And now even teachers themselves, are they upskilled to the extent of implementing the new curriculum?
They need to be retooled.
They have to, and unfortunately our government is not doing enough in terms of making sure that these teachers are upskilled to adapt to this new curriculum. Maybe they are basing on assumption that teachers will shift, but curriculum shifts are a little bit problematic, and if you are not implementing it well, then you are losing the whole objective of implementing that new curriculum. And it calls for increased investment in education, and that's what we are urging government to do. We have to be intentional. Education is one of the parameters in which we can develop a country, and if we decrease investment in education, then the country is going to be doomed.
For example, katika kiloza to Kawempe here, I think in secondary education, Kawempe, the entire Kawempe division has maybe only 2 government schools. And so you've left everything into the hands of the private sector, which is okay. But sometimes if they get challenges in terms of investment, to invest really like it is required to teach these practical subjects. For example, a subject like biology, some schools would want to avoid that, because what you are going to use in your laboratory for biology is expensive. Sometimes you're using it once and you throw it away. Yes. You have to look for more. So who is going to invest in a biology laboratory and look for all these specimens that are not going to be reusable? In most cases, like physics and maybe chemistry, because you may be looking for a frog, or maybe it's a tomato, maybe it is a rat or something like that. You get it, you use it, and you throw it away. That becomes a challenge. And so, and some schools may even avoid such a subject. They say we're not offering that on the account of lack of necessary resources to be able to teach the children.
Yeah, you're right, Kamara. In fact, if UNEB had not made some of these subjects to be compulsory, I think schools would have opted not to offer them because of the expenses given, not only in private schools, but even government schools. I've been moving around my constituency, and the children learning practicals theoretically, because they don't have the apparatus, they don't have the...
You're learning practicals theoretically?
Yes, it is a paradox.
That's a new one.
Yeah, they're just looking on and somebody is demonstrating, and they don't have the apparatus to touch, they don't mix these chemicals themselves, they don't burn the way we studied some of these in biology and chemistry classes, practicals. So that is the biggest challenge. It's not only in private schools, but government has not supported some of the policy. For example, paying the science teachers better. They are there, well paid, they are not facilitated. The schools are not equipped.
Okay, very quickly.
I think the other issue we have is the accreditation process of these private institutions. Do they fulfill the requirements to be accredited by government? And how often does government evaluate the accreditation of these private institutions? For me, it does not make sense at all for government to allow a private school to operate if they cannot
meet the requirements.
Meet the requirements. So government need to come out with a clear policy on accreditation.
But this is where you members of parliament, this is where you come in. You legislate for the country. You're supposed to make the laws that can make the centric, the executive do what is right for the people of Uganda. For example, the division, the Department of the Inspectorate of Education from Samia Bugwe or Rikatikamo. How robust is the inspectorate at the district level to be able to go and inspect the schools, secondary schools and primary schools? Because I remember when you're growing up, if a district inspector was coming to your school, I mean, they would behave. But do we still even have them? Do they, okay, if we have them, do they still have the clout?
They don't have the clout, they don't have the facilitation, and two, for example, in Busia, I want to be specific. We have not had the district inspector of schools, and I asked them why. Because there was wage from the one who retired. It should have been very easy for the district to recruit. But then we were told, the minister gave a directive that when there was wage shortfall, the district was allowed to use wage across board. And now because of that, the wage for the district inspector was swallowed up. Now we have teachers who have been recruited, including science teachers, but this person who is supposed to do
inspection,
the oversight, is not available, and we don't have wage to recruit this person. You can imagine.
All right. Okay. Now some of these things will hinge on budget issues, on finances, and the budget framework paper is on. And you've started the process, and so first of all, before you even look into the proposals they are making and where the money is going to come from, how do you rate government's discipline, or even indiscipline, in dealing with money?
Honestly, I won't give them a 3 out of 10. Of course, if you look at the budget process in developing countries, it's one of the most important things, and the whole country is very attentive on what the budget entails and what it's going to do. And now that is completely different in Uganda. I can confidently tell you not even 10% of Ugandans are bothered by what is happening now with the national budget framework paper.
Even the day when you read it. Back in the day, when they would be reading a budget, I remember my father would sit there with his radio, and perhaps even some of us sit and listen.
Exactly.
And perhaps the entire village would, and a few other people would come around my father's radio to listen what is going on.
Exactly.
But now, it looks like John Bokasaija will be doing his thing.
Exactly, and the entire country is
also doing their thing.
So it's deeply rooted in our constitution. I think it is Article 155 that mandates the president to lay before Parliament the incomes and expenditure of the country, and of course that is operationalized by the
Minister,
by the Public Finance Management Act, Section 3 and 9. But now the process, it's a little bit problematic for me.
As of now, where are we at, Honorable Nyangweso?
Yes.
What are they telling you? What are they presenting? How big is it likely to be? And where will the money come from?
Yeah, it is very interesting. As Honorable Chirumera says, the budget process now has become like a ritual. It has deadlines to meet. We have a budget that you have, and then you carry it forward. It's incremental sort of budgeting as opposed to zero-based budgeting. And it is very frustrating at times. I happen to sit on the committee of budget, and when the budget framework paper was presented last month in Parliament, the sectors sat and interacted with the sector heads, the ministers and the permanent secretaries. And what is surprising is that this is a cabinet document which came from cabinet, and ministers come to Parliament to defend the priority areas. But surprisingly, what came out of sector meetings to the budget committee is a request of unfunded priorities amounting to 13 trillion shillings. on top of the budget that the cabinet has presented of 52.7 trillion
for the 24-25.
24-25. Out of the interactions between the sectors.
Wait a minute. There is a budget proposal of 52 trillion.
52.7.
On top of that, they also need 13 trillion.
Yes, these guys come and say, okay, my sector was given.
So this 13 trillion is kind of supplementary or what?
No, they are praying that it should be included.
So the budget goes to about almost 67 or thereabout.
If the prayers of the sectors is considered, depending on the availability of resources, because that's what they are saying. This is what we need to do.
Okay.
That the ministry has given us.
You have the budget. The committee of parliament has interfaced with the officials from the ministry. So what's your appreciation of what they presented?
They came with a paper. Of course, like we said, it's part of the law. And then, of course, they present it and you have to critique it. The most important aspect, and that's what I want Ugandans to know, is that the National Budget Framework paper is just the beginning of the budget process. It's not the budget itself. But it's an indicative of what we should expect in the budget. Precisely, it's more like a head, and now we are waiting for the tail. So the head will definitely give you the expectations at the tail end. Of course, the goal is to accelerate economic growth. Any budget estimate should focus on accelerating economic growth, the quantitative production of a country, and in terms of increasing goods and services for a country to get money and grow. But now, if you look at our budget framework paper, will it really drive our economy to a whole new level? And the answer I was giving to myself is a no, because if you look at their focus and what they're trying to focus on, expenditure here, expenditure there, expenditure here.
So they are not putting money into development areas that can make more money.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So now, I know, for example, last year they gave a task to the Uganda Revenue Authority to mobilize or collect 25 trillion or thereabout, and they eventually they did, but they struggled to reach 25, and now they've increased it to 30 trillion. Are you sure they'll be able to pull it off?
Actually, the 25 projection for URA was last financial year.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
This current financial year,
it's 30,
is 29.7, which has made
30.
the same projection for next financial year.
Okay, yeah, 29.
And as you say, you can see a lot of struggling by URA. They have said they cannot, actually, they are supposed to be now moving to 32 trillion almost in the next financial year according to the MTF projections, but now they have said we are stuck. One, we don't have staff, we have lost a number of staff. Two, we have almost taxed everything. The domestic revenue mobilization strategy that was launched in 2020 has not been financed. It was supposed to have closed by the next financial year. We have pushed it to 2027-2028 financial year, because it has not produced the results that is required. One, we expected a lot of funding in development, which would generate activities that the taxman would go for. But unfortunately, when you look at the budget, we were interacting with, when the NPA came to interact with the Finance Committee of Parliament, they raised the red flag and said this budget, to be realistic, 97% of this budget is statutory. 93% is statutory, meaning that the leg space for government to spend is 7% of the budget, which is around 4 trillion. 7% of 52%, which is around 7 trillion. The rest of the money in the budget is as good as spent, because you don't have
recurrent expenditure.
Statutory. Salaries that must be paid,
loan repayments,
that must
interest.
be paid, interest that must be paid, amortization which must be done. So the balance of 7% is what government is basically looking at.
Available to spend.
So in other words, there's no money for you to deploy for development activities.
Exactly.
No.
And that's where I have a big problem. If we really want our country to grow, we have to be very deliberate in terms of investment expenditure, not consumption expenditure. If you look at what is happening, the Honorable has categorically mentioned out of the 52.7 trillions, I mean, only 7 that is available, because of course, if you look at the public debt is widening year after year, interests, and so many other expenditures, a taxpayer is going to suffer.
Is it also likely that in the budget framework papers prepared as presented 2024-2025 is that the biggest chunk is the money going for debt servicing or something like that? Is that the case? 29 trillions
yes.
is
going on repayments, expenditures.
So then really, why don't we always say that we have a budget of maybe 12 of 20 trillion instead of saying 50, because actually, the other 30 trillion is not there.
Actually, even before that, you're going to realize that out of the 52 that we are budgeting for, as a country, we are only collecting 29 point something. Now, that means the balance, which is 22 trillions, it must be external or internal borrowing. We are going to the money lender.
Oh my God.
And now that is going to increase our public debt.
Wait a minute. Did you say how much are we likely to collect?
29 points.
That's what we're likely to collect?
Yes.
Locally.
And how much are we supposed to pay to the debt servicing? And
the debt servicing is around 22.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Collection, there's two things that Ugandans need to understand. Our total budget is 52.7. Now, out of the 52.7, locally through our taxes and non-taxable incomes, we are collecting 29.7
yes.
trillions. Now, which means that money alone is not sufficient enough to run our country or the economy, meaning that we are pushed to go and borrow, increasing the public debt, borrowing internally and externally.
What I want you to really explain to the viewer is how much we're able to internally generate and what is required of us to service our debt.
We are supposed to collect from taxable and non-taxable incomes. We are collecting 29.7 trillions. That's what a country must collect, meaning that if we do not borrow as a country,
that's the money
that is the budget, that is the resource envelope we have as a country to run. Now, that cannot even do 50%. Our country cannot run at 50%. So now pushing government to borrow from money lenders outside and domestically. And the big issue is the increasing public debt, the responsibility of Uganda to pay. Now the question is, does our government care enough? Because if you continue to borrow, then it means you are leaving a public debt behind for the new Uganda, that those Ugandans that are going to live after us will have the responsibility to pay the debt that was brought by the current
government. You are in the business of approving loans as members of parliament. You are in the business of putting a load on the head of every Ugandan, even the unborn.
Yeah, the Auditor General, when he was presenting his report last month about when he audited the government for 2022-23, he put the public debt to 97 trillion. This figure, of course, has been contested by government, which says that the public debt is around 86 trillion, which is 46% of GDP. And the Auditor General says it is 51.2 of GDP because it's 97 trillion shillings. But one, like Honorable Chirumira has said, we are faced with a scenario of a budget of 52 trillion. We have been able to collect call it 30 trillion, and you have a balance of 22 trillion. You have external financing, project support of around 9 trillion, which comes direct. We don't touch it. It supports the project developments in the country, and that is around 38 million. So what do you do with the balance? So you come to the market domestically and borrow. They have projected it to borrow. Unfortunately, domestic borrowing is going to increase in the next financial year. We had tried to reduce it because excessive domestic borrowing has an effect on the money available for domestic lending by commercial banks.
Because the banks will...
So you crowd out the borrowers and they go for very expensive.
Okay, gentlemen, honorable members, hold on to your points because we are going to take a break, and on the spot we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Honorable Hassan Kirumida and Honorable Dennis Nyangweso. Gentlemen, you know, okay, before we go, a friend of mine has just sent a comment here. Maybe I should read it for you. Andrew in Fort Portal says, debt is money invested in advance, i.e. for power generation, water for production, roads, etc., which eventually grows the economy. Our concern should be how we invest our borrowed money. What do you make of that?
Rightly so. But if you look at our debts here, I'll give you a very good example of the money that was borrowed to put up a power plant at Karuma. Production was done, and Uganda has in stock a lot of electricity that is not distributed. Now that means that that loan is sitting at the power plant and there's no profits being generated out of that loan. The same applies to this dam which is in the east. So now that's what we keep talking about. It's okay to borrow, but where are we investing money? Are we getting return to investment towards that particular loan? If you look at and that leads us to investment priorities in the country. If you're telling me that we are borrowing money to invest in the tourism sector, make robust investment and growth of our tourism sector, then I'll say yes, that is a positive investment because it has shown you on balance of probabilities that there is potential in terms of growth in that particular sector. Compare the investment of Uganda in tourism and that of Rwanda. Then you'll know that we are pedaling. We are pedaling.
One of the roles of you members of parliament is to appropriate funds for government to spend. So I mean, that is a role perhaps you haven't done so well.
Yeah, I want to agree with you that in this one we have all fallen short. Because one, like the viewer has rightly said, borrowing is not a problem. The efficiency use of the money we borrow is the issue here. One, the loans come with the terms and conditions. And at times, I wonder whether we scrutinize some of the terms and conditions. For example, if a loan has come with counter funding, before such a loan is approved, we should first task government.
Do you have the capacity?
Have you provided funds? If, for example, we are dealing now with the budget framework, and you are saying sources of funding for this budget will be this loan, but this loan says that 20% will be provided by government of Uganda. Have you provided this 20% in the budget which you are going to approve? So we approve the loan, we approve the budget with the borrowing without providing funds for counter funding. Now what happens that this loan, because it's not being, we are not utilizing the money because of lack of counter funding, we are instead paying penalties as part of the conditions of the loans. And this is where the problem comes from. So you are not utilizing the money, you are instead the taxpayer who is supposed to benefit from this loan is instead now paying penalties because you have not utilized the money Because
you're paying penalty on the money sitting dormant on the account.
Exactly.
And in some cases, by the way, money is returned. I've not heard of ministries where money is returned because of lack of absorption capacity and things like that. Those really, such stuff really annoy, especially road infrastructure and things like that, even at the district level, or even here. I've been hearing cases CA, there's money that is supposed to be returned the African Development Bank because we have not been able to use it, and yet here we are in
borrowing again
in a city where the roads, where potholes are everywhere. Somebody was joking that the Kampala potholes are the kind of potholes, if you are listening to Simba, they can take you to Akavozi. Just dig a pothole. But I understand they are unfunded priorities. Is that how they call them? And government was again coming to Parliament to ask for funds. How did you deal with that? And how much are we talking about?
Yeah, we had a challenge when we were approving the budget for 2022-23 as Parliament, because as the budget committee, I've been sitting on this budget committee for the last 3 years, inception of the 11th Parliament. So because at that time, ministers came and stampeded the Parliament and said, I cannot operate. I have been given money for fuel, but I have not been given money for a car. So because of such kind of budgeting,
wait, the minister is giving money for fuel, but he has no car.
I just give a scenario,
okay,
an example.
Okay.
So what we did was to reallocate within the budget, and this did go well with the president. So when we were doing the budget for the last year, the budget which is running, we had a discussion with the president and we said, we are stuck. You sit in cabinet, you agree on this document, you bring it to Parliament, and as we consider the people you sat with to approve the budget and bring to Parliament, they come and say, help. And they said, no, this one shouldn't arise. Any minister who comes to Parliament with prayers of unfunded priorities, report to them to me, I will discipline them. As we talk now, as I told you, when we are considering the budget framework paper, the sectors came to the budget committee with the unfunded priorities of 13 trillion shillings. Money which they require, which
in this current ongoing budget.
Yes.
13
they
trillion.
Have provided an estimate of 52.7, but the unfunded, which they should be, where we should look for money and allocate, is 13 trillion. So we have reviewed as a budget committee, tried to cancel and reduce on their prayers, but we could not reduce to zero. We could only reduce to 3.4 trillion shillings. But that government must now provide and make it part of the final estimate.
Somebody comes with unfunded priority up to the level of 13 trillion, and it is trimmed to 3 trillion. That should be a suspicious kind of priority.
No. It's actually appropriation of funds that is a problem. Because if you are going to budget to spend money on State House, on the Ministry of Defense, and if you look at the exorbitant amount of money that goes there and purely expenditure, and then you look at the rate of investment in the education sector and the health sector, they'll definitely come. This year alone, I've been called by teachers in my district. They have not been paid their salaries from November.
Same
teachers,
with
you know. Yeah. So it means that there's a mismatch in our appropriation. We end up putting money where it is not supposed to be. Today, the Honorable Uganda was on the floor of Parliament, telling us only the presidential convoy has 69 cars, and that's a whole lot of money that we budget for to cater, buy fuel, and make sure that the convoy of the president moves. Now look at how many ambulances do we have in the whole country. I think it's around 178. So there's a total mismatch in terms of our investment as a country. Where are we supposed to be putting the taxpayers' money? If we put that money on consumption, State House, Ministry of Defense, and other sectors that are not productive, we shall continuously end up with the same problem.
So now, there's a lot of fiscal indiscipline. How do you deal with that?
Of course, government policy.
Their government policy must change. One, there has been, when you look, the budget is supposed to fund the plan. And this is the National Development Plan. But I told you we interacted with the National Planning Authority. One, there is an issue which we also realized that the National Development Plan underwent a review, mid-term review, and Parliament was not, much as Parliament approved the National Development Plan 3, did not participate in the review of the National Development Plan. And therefore, the allocations, the forecasts for the next budget have been put in consideration with the results of the mid-term review. And this is not part, Parliament was not part, and now Parliament has to play a role to do the appropriation. So there is some bit of mismatch of planning. For example, like Honorable Chirumira said, ambulances. They are put in the budget to procure more ambulances, procure more x-rays for the hospitals, but they are put a freeze on the recruitment of staff. So we are going to spend on equipment, but the staff to operate these equipments, the districts cannot afford them because the money has not been provided in the budget. So you can imagine that they intend to come to Parliament to ask for a supplementary funding for wage, which should be statutory, which you should take first call. But because of a mismatch of planning.
But how can you even have a mismatch of planning? Because if you know this is for statutory obligations that you're obliged to pay salaries, how do you miss to put that in a budget and you come back for a supplementary budget?
Do they even plan better? Because the Honorable will tell you what happened in that meeting between the Committee on Budget and the Minister of Finance, where they came up with two ceilings. The first ceiling was 52.
Yes.
and then the second ceiling was 54.
Yes.
So I don't think they lack planning. You cannot have two ceilings in the same report you're presenting to the budget committee. So there's a whole lot of unprofessionalism, I must say, lack of planning. And when you expect the members of parliament, maybe they think members of parliament do not critique.
We don't do the scrutiny. So
exactly. We are just consumers of knowledge. And the deficit was 18 trillions.
Yes.
Who does that? I mean, really. So they are sleeping on duty. They are sleeping on their job. Job is a job and it must be done, especially on issues of national interests. You cannot play with a national budget. It's a national cake. It's a national cake that is supposed to work for the country.
You have a role, an oversight role. Sometimes when the money is gotten and money is deployed for work, we expect quality work. We expect service delivery that is robust. But when it is not, then we come to us and we come to them and say you didn't do your job. Because in most cases, there's shoulda work also.
No, I'll give you a very quick example. We went to Speak Resort Munyonyo with the Committee on Trade to do our oversight duties. And then military surrounded us and we are not allowed to access premises on orders from above. So there's a lot of limitations in terms of what members of parliament are supposed to do. You go to the field, like these guys who went to Lubowa to check on that hospital. Then military is there, SFC deployed. You cannot access this particular facility. There's so many things. There's so many things that are going on in our country, but the most difficult thing to accept is that most of this money, it's borrowed money that comes now, and then the taxpayer you need to burden the taxpayer, that woman from Oblenz, from Toninyira, collecting that little money and giving it to government, and then it ends up in the wrong hands. There's no value addition to that money. I think it's a joke. It's a big joke. And
there is an issue that government wants to be frugal. I've seen the merger of these state parastatals, state agencies, that maybe that will create an element of government being frugal. What do you make of that?
Kamara, before you complete that
yes.
So that's the paradox we are talking about. This has been government policy from 2021. Mm-hmm. And what happens in 2023, budget 2023-24 framework, the Minister of Public Service came to Parliament saying we have not budgeted for the merging process. We have not provided money for severance package for agencies that are supposed to be
exiting, the employees, and so forth. So
Oh my God.
they have a funding gap of 79 billion. So among the money I'm talking about, the unfunded priorities, that is inclusive.
Okay.
The hope of Ugandans that
So did you leave that one in the
we have
2 to
proposed
3
that
trillion?
yes, it's part, because government must provide, if they are serious with merging to create efficiency and avoid the duplication and so forth. So it's among the little we have
That have survived in the
yes that
the cutting.
government must provide it. But you can imagine that the budget of the Ministry of Public Service is not even 25, it's 35 billion. But they have unfunded priority of 79 trillion to undertake that.
79 billion.
79 billion.
Okay.
I think for me, on contrary, totally against this whole process of rationalization and taking these institutions, agencies back to government. For starters, they were established by an act of parliament.
For a reason.
Yeah, for a reason. Like NITAU was established by an act of parliament to ensure that the whole country is connected digitally, and it's, of course it precipitates growth in the country. Look at REA for electricity distribution. One of the biggest problems we have in Uganda is lack of distribution of our electricity, and that was REA doing that, plus so many other agencies. So for me, we just need to go back to the drawing board and know what we are supposed to do. What is eating our agencies and ministries is corruption. The moment we do not address the core issue that is affecting the country, and that is corruption, we shall continue to lament, we shall continue suffering, and Ugandans, taxpayers, will continue suffering. So we need to go back on the drawing board and learn from our mistakes, do things right, and make sure that we have Uganda at heart. We need to be patriotic.
But you don't believe there's, in some cases, a duplication of roles and inefficiency?
No, it was established for a reason. And these are technicals. I've interacted with some of them. They are technicals. Some of them were professionally recruited to do that particular job. And some of the recruitments in the ministries are political. You know, they lack the technical ability to do a certain job. I'll give you an example. These ministers are appointed. General 7 wakes up in the morning and posts, minister, go to gender, go to finance, go anywhere without any background in that particular field. Now, you are sending people who are not technical in the field, and you're expecting results from that particular ministry. I mean, really? So we should stop being jokers in our country and be intentional in terms of...
well, when they appoint these political heads, actually there are some technical people actually running the ministry under the PS.
Just do your statistics properly and tell me whether 100% those ministers fit. We have seen them in parliament. Some of them cannot even present a paper from their ministry.
I want to... That's really tough, eh? What you've just said is very
No,
true.
I'm being very honest. Maybe people will think I'm doing politics, but it is the truth.
Yeah,
It is the truth.
Yeah, times were
According to you MPs on the committee, the express highway makes at least 3 billion shillings per month. But I'm told only 7 billion shilling annual revenue has been declared to the committee. What explanation were you given?
We are not given an explanation, and the committee has recommended a forensic audit by Auditor General, because
On the expressway?
yes, on the expressway, to see who is telling the truth. That's basically that.
Who is taking the money? Well, that's
Who is taking the money?
Yeah, we need to be very honest. We need to have that level of patriotism. We all know it is one of the most expensive roads in the world that was constructed from a loan. And now we know that that loan has to be paid. There is collection.
Yes.
Where is the money going? I think that's where we need
Investment
to...
is effective. When you look at the committee observations, that the 7 billion which is collected per month, we should have even taken a shorter period to repay the
Maybe
loan.
it was privatized and there's a private individual.
So, gentlemen, there's a lot of money that's going to be coming into the economy through the oil and gas sector. You know, investors, even now I'm told the refinery, they're going to start building. So that should be able maybe to give an oomph to the economy.
No, I was checking, actually I was so much interested on the incomes from the petroleum towards our budget. The previous financial year, there's 0-0, and this one we are estimating is also 0-0.
Yes.
It means that there's no income generation so far. That's what government is telling us. But if you go internationally and read about oil and exportation, you'll find out international papers do not lie. They will tell you Uganda is one of those countries that are exporting oil products. Now you start questioning, where is this money? Who is doing the exportation? Where is it coming from? Where is the money going? They are telling us we're expecting 0-0 from petroleum, and that is it's problematic for me.
Okay,
and now you're burdening the taxpayer to pay. You are giving lavish and ceremonious tax holidays to your investors. You see, actually, the bigger point is that as a country, we do not know how to collect money. We keep thinking that that person who is selling on the street must pay taxes. And indeed they pay. Some of their businesses have even closed because they cannot cope up. Now you are giving ceremonious and lavish, generous tax holidays to your investors, the Pinetis like they were coming, plus other big investors in the country, and you are burdening the common person with a lot of taxes. Are you intentional towards growth? Because we all know that economic growth in the country can be done by the locals in terms of production of goods and services, and that will improve the economic growth in our country. So as a country, we need to be very deliberate in terms of what we want. If it is foreign investment, why give them generous and lavish tax holidays? If it is money to be borrowed, what are we going to do? What are we going to invest in with that money? So we need to go back to the drawing board, be patriotic and love our country. Only then this country will progress.
Yeah, back to your question, Kamara, the issue of investment in oil and gas. Of course, it has been estimated that in the next financial year, the investment in the gas and oil is going to be between 6 to 8 trillion shillings, because we have reached a point of almost getting oil in 2025. But not all this investment is going to cause cash flow in the country. Some of these investments are going to come through equipment and the technological transfer, which will have an effect much later when we start getting our own oil here. But it is true, the estimated cost of investment in oil and gas between now and 2026 is just the next financial year alone is estimated to be between 6 to 8 trillion shillings. But these are heavy equipments, very expensive equipments, very expensive technology, which might not be cash to the economy, but an investment for future.
Honorable, could you be knowing the share of Uganda as a country from that project? What are we going to get as Ugandans from that project? Because you may end up with a 5% out of 100, and the whole money that is obtained from the oil production, it's taken by
France or Beijing, to Paris or Beijing. So, but I hear the whole policy of local content. I thought that is where I would be able to at least attract 30%.
Do you know of any local person that is an investor in the oil industry? I don't know. I have not seen anyone from Luwero, from Woblenzi. from Kampala maybe. Who are the investors? Who are the beneficiaries of this from this oil project?
So we've just been hearing the head of state address the nation ahead of tomorrow's celebrations. It's a public holiday, and he seems to be in a robust mood that the economy is actually doing well. It will be running at a considerable rate, and he's very optimistic. You buy that optimism?
That is politics, pure politics, because you cannot tell me that the economy is so good when you can only collect 29 trillions and you are going to borrow 22 trillions. It means we are nosediving. We are nosediving, and that is the truth. We do not have, for me, I do not see any positive from the previous financial year. If you look at the taxable income, there's an increment of 1% from the previous financial year into this one, which is projected. So where is economic growth there? At least in the previous financial year, the transition was 4% increment in the taxable income and not taxable income. This year, it is 1%. Where is the growth that is telling Ugandans? We just have to be very honest. There is a problem in our country, there is a gap, and we have to fulfill our responsibility and stop sleeping on duty.
So let me just one more question for both of you. What do you think the government should focus on as a priority in the budget 2024-2025? This budget, what should be the focus?
The focus of government should be in private sector development. We know very well that one, URA is collecting 60% of its revenue, 65 kilometers radius from within Kampala. One, government must redevelop Kampala metropolitan, because majority of the taxpayers are within this country, within this radius, Kampala metropolitan. So the first thing government must do, if they must increase revenue collection by URA, is to develop Kampala metropolitan. Construct the roads, make them passable. The cost of doing business in Kampala is too expensive. The time taken for people to do business, people who are paying heavily these taxes, the time lost is too much. Number two, government must deliberately reduce the cost of doing business. They must provide credit to Uganda Development Bank, Uganda Microfinance Support Center, and this such that the cost of capital is reduced. Okay. Three, government, I represent Busia, and I have been making an appeal to government that URA in Busia and Tororo is why they collect the highest taxes. It has become, Busia and Malaba, they have become slums. The cost of doing business there, when you look at it, you feel sorry for these international businesses, these international businessmen. Now, for example, a truck takes 3 days in Busia for clearance, just to cross, an empty truck crossing from Busia from Uganda to Kenya. They don't allow them until 10 p.m. So 3 days of idling. This is cost of transportation, which affects businesses, and these are the businesses which provide the taxes for government. So if government is very serious and they are looking at URA as the only source of budget support to increase this to possibly, we can do it up to 40 trillion. But how do you want to do it? Instead of burdening the few taxpayers, promote the private sector, the cost of doing business, reduce the cost of electricity, reduce the cost of capital, reduce the time of doing business.
Okay. Hassan, what do you think should be the priorities?
One, we need to invest in productive sectors. The agriculture sector, mechanize our agriculture. That will promote our exports, do import substitution, reduce on the imports. That will stimulate our economy. Two, cut wasteful expenditures. State House, defense, cut, invest, bring the money, invest it in the health sector and education, because there's a positive return to investment there. 3, pay people you are owing. We all know that there's domestic arrears. Government owes over 5.97 trillions to local suppliers.
Oh my God.
And now these are Ugandans that started their businesses. They supplied government and government is not paying them. Some of them have closed shop because they cannot carry on with business. Government is owing them money. Now what does that mean? You are crippling the economy. You are making sure that Ugandans are not productive. There's no production in the economy. And when there's no production, there's no economic growth. Right. So those 3 factors will try to rejuvenate our...
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for the time you have given us. But just before we go, I know they're supposed to send 100 million at every parish in your constituency. It is called the Parish Development Model, PDM. Have your people gotten that money? Is it helping? Hassan, is it helping?
Of course, we rejected
that money
as the opposition when it came to Parliament because we knew it's going to be doomed. Look at the implementation process and how they rushed into it after failing
Is that what the people of Katikam really want? You to reject that money?
Of course, right now I have so many messages of people that are telling me we did not get the money. 2, even the people who gotten the money, it is Christmas money. They are buying suits, people are getting married. They do not even know that it's a revolving fund, that money must be taken back to government for someone else to use it. And now that simply means there is a whole issue with that money. And I keep telling my people that if there is money, go take it. Do not lose out on the opportunity of taking money, but whether it's going to stimulate economic growth like government purports to say, I don't think so.
Your own case in Samia Bugwe Central?
The biggest challenge and crisis is that this parish model was built on pillars. And unfortunately, the pillar which was to give out money, the financial inclusion pillar, seemed to have come earlier than the rest of the pillars. So the people, majority of the people who received the money were not prepared. Of course, we are expecting these people to use this money effectively, enter into production, create jobs, create production, then we create a chain for agro-processing and value addition. But as Honorable Chirumira says, most of this money has not been put to meaningful economic activity, and therefore.
But it seems it looks like for the NRM it's gonna be a master stroke, because have 100 million at every parish, and perhaps nobody's going to be on your case looking for that money. Hassan, that money.
I want to believe
that money, whether they have put it to good use or not, is going to be politically a game changer. Just watch it. Just watch it. Dennis, what's going to be your parting shot?
My parting shot still goes to the people of Uganda, that not all is well. That one I can assure you. But because when you look at this budget, most people have been thinking, when they look at the budget, they are looking at the expenditure part of it. But the most important part of the budget is the revenue part of it. So the revenue collections, according to the projection, have not increased. URA has given us the same figures, and as Parliament we have been constrained to provide any funding, extra funding for key sectors of the economy. We have a lot of issues that seem to remain unfunded, and yet they are very key in trying to drive development.
Hassan, your parting shot.
As a country, we have to take off in terms of industrialization and production, and that requires a positive attitude from government. They have to be intentional and deliberate in terms of making sure that Uganda moves to a whole new level in terms of investment. If we do not do that, we are not patriotic, we do not love our country, and we are going to remain stagnant. People will continue to suffer, especially the taxpayers. But before I complete, please just allow me make mention of one aspect. I've always told myself, every time I get an opportunity on the media house, I'll remind government to come out with a message to the people of Palestine. Uganda is a member state among those Muslim countries. and deliberately they are silent on all the atrocities that are happening in Palestine, how women and children are being killed. So we continuously urge the government to come out and declare their position on this conflict in Palestine. That was NAM. It was not the government of Uganda. They need to come out openly and declare their position on this conflict, and preferably advocate for a ceasefire and release of the political prisoners. Thank you.
Right. Honorable Hassan Kirumira, Member of Parliament for Katikamu South. Thank you so much for being here. Honorable Dennis Nyangweso, Member of Parliament for Samia Bugwe Central. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having spared your time, for having added value to this platform. We hope to see you again. We've learned a lot from you, and I hope the viewers have also learned a thing or two. And for you, the viewer, I want to thank you for the privilege of your company. Tomorrow, I understand it's Liberation Day, so I can say Happy Liberation Day and Happy Holiday. Good night and God bless Uganda.
I will liberate.